it seems just despicably unfair that certain authorities would target these pastors and these places of worship in the first place. Last word goes to you, my friend.
No, I absolutely agree. And when I caught up with Pastor Tobias while he was in Alberta, he spoke of some of the individuals in his own community that have faced suicides within their families. And this is a case where people were divided over the mandates and restrictions that were being imposed during the Christmas season. And that division inevitably led to the most unfortunate circumstance for this individual. So it's something we're seeing across the board. And I think pastors have an ear out for this sort of thing. People come to them with these sort of conversations. And I think that's why they're especially being targeted by the state.
His church also now faced a potential $1 million fine. Pastor Tobias continued on without being arrested until October 18th, when the RCMP arrested him in front of his crying children, as opposed to the church where he had frequently presented himself for arrest.
Where we go now?
He was let free around 45 hours later after signing conditions for his release, and our chief videographer, Mocha, was quickly on scene to hear from the church. We later caught up with Pastor Tobias himself to find out what conditions he had to sign in order to be released, along with his expectations moving forward.
While I'm not allowed to incite or organize or invite anybody to a gathering that is in contravention of COVID-19, it goes on to say, to clarify, this does not affect his ability to perform regular religious services and perform his duties as a pastor.
Even after resolving the matter of his warrant, authorities continued to harass his family. Pastor Tobias called them out for these tactics and set a meeting with police, at which time he was given over $17,000 in fines for hosting church services in violation of the Quarantine Act.
So you didn't quarantine then when you came in?
As Pastor Tobias has stated previously, he and the church hold the understanding that these health orders are in violation of our fundamental freedoms here in Canada. Joining us today is Pastor Tobias to talk about this latest wave of tickets that were brought on because of the way he practices his faith, and it so being deemed illegal by the state under the Quarantine Act.
Been through a lot, I guess, in the last 2 years, and of course, many of you have seen previous coverage from Rebel News for all the stuff we've been through as far as fines and arrest.
All right, so Tobias, can you step out of the car? You're under arrest. You have an outstanding warrant for your arrest, okay?
And, you know, fines have kept coming all the way up to this year so far. As far as them targeting us for keeping on gathering as a church, that has stopped, and we're very thankful for that. We've been able to gather peacefully since June of last year, and we consider that as a win for us at this point, because it's obviously better to be able to gather peacefully instead of having or knowing that you're being surveilled and they're trying to see if there's more charges coming and all that. So we're very thankful for that.
Well, folks, you remember the narrative these past 2 years when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic? You know, we're all in this together. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We saw the big superstores stay open. We saw the government-run liquor stores stay open. But if you had the temerity to open your church, well, that was a different thing. You were shut down. You were jailed. Your church, in some cases, was surrounded by a fence. It was absolutely despicable. And you need look no further than what happened with Pastor Tobias Thyssen. Right now, I am joined by Sid Fizzard, our man in Calgary. Sid, how you doing there?
Great. How are you guys doing down there?
Oh, we're doing great. Sid, I find this heartbreaking. As you mentioned in the video, he is facing, or the church is facing, a potential $1 million fine. No little church has $1 million just lying there in the collection plates. What's going on with this, I think, vendetta against Pastor Tobias?
Yeah, it was certainly threatening, and it was around the same time that Manitoba was having a lottery, a get vaccinated type lottery, where they're handing out large amounts of money. And I think that was part of why it was threatened a ticket of possibly $1 million, which is interesting. And you see there's other people on that list who also were facing fines, but nowhere near to the same extent.
And yet, Sid, when we come to the science, because we were told ad nauseum that every one of these COVID-19 policies and decisions and laws were driven by the science, when it comes to that, is there any evidence whatsoever that Pastor Tobias's church was some kind of a super spreader for the coronavirus?
There are certainly threats that the area may have at certain times been having higher COVID numbers, but the fact of the matter is they weren't even allowed to have drive-in church services, windows rolled up, you listen in through the radio. They weren't even allowed to do that without the RCMP trying to block off their parking lot. So I think these tactics we're seeing are certainly just threats of punishment or compliance. Those are your only two options.
You know, Sid, that's amazing because it reminds me of Henry Hildebrand's church. We went out a year ago to visit those services. And the same deal. It was like a drive-in movie. Everybody was in their vehicles, windows up, a radio frequency presenting the sermon. And that was offside. And yet literally about, 300 or 400 meters down the road from that church of Pastor Hildebrand was a no-frills grocery store packed to the gills with shoppers. So where's the science there? I would suggest that there's far more of a chance of an outbreak if people of different families are inside a grocery store hobnobbing as opposed to families segregating themselves in their own private vehicles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd agree with you. And I think, it's a problem that we're seeing it in multiple provinces. That was what Tobias had to deal with as well, where liquor stores were open. Walmarts were open, and we even had reporters going to the Walmarts. And even though you could fill the house, basically, there were many sections that were based on Christmas services and, Christmas trees, Christmas cards, Christmas-themed clothing. Was all blocked off. So it just goes further down that rabbit hole of this is punishment towards religious groups as well.
Yeah, so you can walk into a liquor store, typically government-run and operated in our great Dominion, and that's okay, but you can't go to a pastor, especially at a time, Sid, I think, in the last 2 years, what have we seen? Depression spiking, suicide and suicide attempts. People, I think, needed that kind of outreach to go to a church or whatever your place of worship was, to come out of the darkness, so to speak. It seems just despicably unfair that certain authorities would target these pastors and these places of worship in the first place. Last word goes to you, my friend.
No, I absolutely agree. And when I caught up with Pastor Tobias while he was in Alberta, he spoke of some of the individuals in his own community that have faced suicides within their families. And this is a case where people were divided over the mandates and restrictions that were being imposed during the Christmas season. And that division inevitably led to the most unfortunate circumstance for this individual. So it's something we're seeing across the board. And I think pastors have an ear out for this sort of thing. People come to them with these sort of conversations. And I think that's why they're especially being targeted by the state.
Hey folks, that was an excerpt from my show, Rebel Roundup. Now, to get the full meal deal, why not go to Rebel News Plus, sign up, and never miss a Rebel News Plus show in the future.